delighted to be joined today by Rory Cormac. Rory, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks so much for talking to me.
I can hear the rain in the background, so you're getting a nice suntan there, are you?
It is pouring down in the sunny East Midlands.
Let's start at the beginning. How did you get into the world of secret intelligence, covert operations and such like?
To be honest, I accidentally fell into it, but I'm so lucky that I get to write and speak and research stuff. One is really interesting, and two, I think is really important. I've been doing this for about 12, 13 years or so now, and what's really kind of kept my attention is the fact that this stuff is all around us, and it's supposed to be secret, and yet it's been in the news almost on a daily basis since, let's think about it, since 2014, with the so-called little green men and the annexation of Crimea with Russia. And we all knew what was going on. And then you have the 2016 US presidential election. We all knew what was going on there. And there's been numerous examples ever since, and it's still going on today. And what I find absolutely fascinating is this is covert, this is secret, and yet paradoxically we're all talking about it, and it's influencing us and it's shaping democracies. So it's fascinating. It's got great stories. I love a story, but it's also, I think, a really important part of international relations we all need to be more aware of.
So let me come on to the stories later, because I agree that's the fun part. But let me kind of, if we are all aware of it and it has such seismic impact on our lives when we're talking about like the elections or whatever, why do we still let it happen? Why is there not more rising up by the people?
Because it's really hard to know what is going on and when and why. What is happening? We live in this age of supposed unsecrecy when it's more and more difficult than ever before for states to do secret stuff. And yet when they do it in an unacknowledged manner, it's really, really hard to pinpoint exactly when it becomes illegitimate, when it crosses a line. Where is that line in the sand? When a country is doing a bit of influencing or pushing a bit of disinformation across, it's very difficult to know when to intervene and how. And with all of these things, hostile states, Russia, whoever, they prey on existing divisions and existing tensions in society. So how do we separate, hostile state activity from internal dissent and legitimate political criticism? It's very, very difficult to do.
And so, from your perspective, how do you do it? Like, what's your role in it?
I think I try and make two main contributions to this whole debate. The first one is we can't just separate us and them. We can't just say this is all the fault of Russia or China or whoever. They are trying to interfere. Of course they are. And I've built a career on trying to point out and work out how to respond. But at the same time, they are relying on internal divisions, whether it's Brexit, immigration, religion, whatever it might be, to exploit and undermine. And I think that we need to be more aware of that interplay between external and internal. And then the second main point behind a lot of the stuff I write and talk about is that this isn't new. And it feels new in this age of cyber attacks, and it feels new in this, in the digital world. But actually, states have been dividing and exploiting since states first existed. There was a lovely quote from one of Queen Elizabeth I's advisors talking about, and I quote, covert means to go and undermine Philip II of Spain. And it's exactly the same as what Putin is doing to us right now. So the means have changed, of course they have, but the actual fundamental principles of let's find a division, let's turn the society's internal mechanisms against it, to undermine it, to sow confusion, to spread paralysis among societies and governments. This is what's happening now on steroids, but it's been going on for literally millennia.
But is the fact that we are more aware of it because kind of the world is maybe more transparent than ever, does that almost inspire more degree of helplessness? I am aware of this, but I don't know what to do with it. So you're educating me, but without the tools.
It's spreading so much confusion, and what's happening is we have awareness of it, but then suddenly that awareness can be dismissed as being, pro one side of the argument or pro the other side. And when suddenly the whole so-called disinformation industry, when this pops up, and academics or journalists or the BBC, whoever it may be, is trying to discuss what may or may not be disinformation, and we are educating about this, but at the same time you get accused, or one gets accused of being a state-sponsored arbiter of what is true and what is not true, for example. So there are so many different contradictory accusations. It's very, very difficult for the truth, whatever that may be, to cut through what is becoming an increasingly noisy ecosystem of nonsense, lies, spin, some truth, some manipulated, whatever it may be. We're living in a very confusing information environment, and I think that is the challenge for people wanting to build societal resilience and wanting to counter hostile narratives and disinformation is cutting through all of that when they're doing their fact checking.
And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I know you speak about the resilience to sabotage, and I suppose that's, like, for individuals and for businesses, kind of how important is it for us to build up our resilience around the whole area? It's
incredibly important, and this is going to take a whole of society response, and that's going to include governments, of course it is, including government doing secret things, but it's also going to include working closely with businesses and with civil society and NGOs and universities. And one of the things, businesses are facing cyber attacks regularly. They're facing decisions about when and how to decouple with certain countries who may have supply chains through, who may be increasingly our competitors, shall we say, to put it euphemistically. And so how does that affect supply chains? How do we build resilience around certain technologies, for example, especially when this competition is unacknowledged? And if you're dealing with a certain country, and lots of countries engage in this kind of activity, we're not just talking about Russia and China, although they are the most prominent examples, but you're dealing with countries that are also acting in an undeclared manner, in a kind of covert way against British or Western interests. How do businesses respond to that uncertainty and that lack of acknowledgement? And I think we all need to work together to build this whole of society response.
So can I ask from your perspective, you've spoken at places like Number 10, you've spoken at the Cabinet Office, the Pentagon. When you're talking to that type of audience, as opposed to maybe when you're talking to, I think for want of a better word, a more layman audience, how are you delivering the content?
I think a lot of it depends on what the audience is interested in and what their background and prior knowledge is. When I'm talking with government audiences, one of the things people are most interested in is what lessons can we learn from the past, and being reminded that this isn't new and that a lot of their predecessors were facing the exact same questions. And I take great delight in reading out quotes from the archives from the 1960s or the 1970s, and them sitting there and thinking, oh my goodness, that sounds like a meeting we had just yesterday. So I do a lot of that, but then I do a lot of work with public audiences, book festivals, other types of maybe corporate audiences, talking about the wider societal importance of this and why it matters to all of us, why we should care about democratic interference, why we should care about disinformation. I mean, a lot of it sounds quite technical around cyber attacks, and people think, I don't care, I don't understand computers, or it sounds like fun James Bond stories, and people can be interested in blowing up pipelines, and they read that and they think this is a really cool story, which it is very, very fascinating. And like we said earlier, I'm lucky to be able to read these stories, but at the same time, there is a really important point to all of this about how we in the West protect our democracies and our institutions against the steady drip, drip, drip of subversion that we're seeing. And when I talk to clients and different audiences, that's the message.
So let me ask one last question, which is, so therefore, everything you said, are you optimistic about where we're going, or do you feel actually it's going to get worse before it gets better, I suppose?
I think it's certainly a very, very challenging environment. And where I think I am slightly optimistic is I don't see coups. I don't see, the British government or the American government being overthrown by a Russian-sponsored coup or a electoral interference where Russia or China or Iran, whoever it may be, rigs the results of our election. Or there's not going to be a cyber 9/11 or a cyber Pearl Harbor. I'm an optimist there. Where I think the challenge comes is the more amorphous drip of subversion and just gradually spreading confusion, gradually chipping away at trust in the so-called mainstream media or in the judiciary or in politicians or whoever it may be. And I think it's intangible, it's difficult to put your finger on it, and that makes it quite dangerous, I think. And that's where the confusion, the paralysis will start to seep in. So I worry about that less than, say, the cyber 9/11.
Brilliant. Rory, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time today, and have a great day, and hope it stops raining.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.